warming and cooling one spot on your body can improve your overall comfort without changing your core temperature. And this is something we all kind of knew intuitively insofar as we've warmed our hands by a campfire, where you're warming your hands on a chilly fall night and you just really feel better overall, or you're dipping your toes in the ocean on a hot summer day. And we really took that experience of the power of thermal sensation that we all know and were able to, thanks to some, science and engineering, transform it into a product that makes it more accessible and convenient for people who don't have control of temperature and suffer as a result.
Welcome to the Invention Stories podcast, where we share stories of inventors who turn their idea into a product. Please visit our website at www.inventionstories.com. And now, from the Invention Stories Podcast World Headquarters Studios in Morro Bay, California, is our host, Robert Baer.
Welcome to the Invention Stories Podcast. I am your host, Robert Baer, and thank you for listening. This is episode 15, the first of a two-part series with Sam Shades of Ember Labs and his invention, Ember Wave. By the time this podcast is made available, the Ember Wave Kickstarter campaign has already raised over $461,000. When I was young, I imagined we'd all be walking around wearing suits that were solar-powered, that you could control the temperature inside of, and at this time, I've yet to see one. About 4 years ago, I learned about Wristify and believed it to be the first step in my solar suit vision. We first shared Wristify, thermal-controlled reimagined, on Invention Stories back on December 2nd, 2013. Today we're speaking Sam Shades of Ember Labs, who is currently in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Sam, it's great to have you with us on the Invention Stories podcast. I want to start off by asking, why did you change the name from Wristify to Ember Wave?
So we changed the product name from Wristify to Ember Wave as part of our launch. And it was kind of just maybe the evolution of, as you know, Wristify kind of started as a student project a couple years ago. And now the Ember Wave is sort of like, we eventually did so much development that we're like, this is no longer the thing that we started with. We actually published a blog post about it, which I can certainly send to you afterward. But we're now calling it the Ember Wave is the kind of punchline.
And Sam, what does Ember, E-M-B-R, Wave stand for?
Yeah, Environment, Mind, Body, Resonance.
You are the Chief Enthusiasm Officer. I think that's what I read on your LinkedIn profile, and I liked it because, number one, when people are really smart, a lot of times it makes for a dull podcast. And if somebody calls them enthusiasm, that gives me like, yeah, okay, well, they're going to know that people are listening to bring their enthusiasm. That's cool. And second of all, you guys have been working on this since 2013. And I'm sure it's not always been a whole lot of fun 24 hours a day. And there may be, sometimes they need a little enthusiasm officer to remind them this should be fun, and so.
Yeah, very well said. You hit the nail on the head. I'll certainly try to bring the energy for your audience. And, like you said, it's been a roller coaster, and you do need to remind yourself this is challenging, but challenging in the fun way. And, it's also enthusiasm for our customers and helping tell their stories and be successful. And, our suppliers, really, I think of it as everyone who comes in contact with our company, I want them to leave with a smile.
I think what you're doing is really cool. I think it's so revolutionary and fascinating, the kind of thing that I find exciting and I think the world needs to know about. But I wanted to start at the beginning, Sam. What kind of kid were you? Did you pull apart the TV as a kid and see how it worked?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I was actually more of a sports kid. So my first love growing up was really baseball. And, I played all different kinds of sports. And, I was kind of a small kid. I was always the youngest and the smallest kid in my grade. And I have 3 siblings. So it was a pretty rowdy house, a lot of energy, a lot of people talking over each other at the dinner table. But, I really loved baseball and then, loved sports and then transitioned over in middle school and high school into wrestling. I really found myself and my confidence on the wrestling mat where, it's a sport where size doesn't matter because it's weight class based. And I really love the one-on-one nature of just you and an opponent. And it's, who's put in more time training ends up getting their hand raised. And, what was amazing too is to find that the work ethic I discovered in wrestling and the satisfaction of training really hard and achieving my goals, I realized that, the same thing applied academically and that it's fun to do well in school the same way it's fun to do well in sports.
So just in general, you're a pretty competitive guy. No matter what it is, you just love a good challenge and you like to win, right?
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting too, just one more on the wrestling thing. There's an interesting parallel in that, everyone who starts their own business says it's the hardest thing I've ever done. And everyone who wrestles says it's the hardest thing I've ever done. And I certainly see a lot of parallels between the two in terms of, at the end of the day, you're accountable to yourself and other people are counting on you. But, I definitely had the competitive fire wrestling. And, I think as you age and step away from competing, it's cooled down a little bit. But, now as we're getting ready to launch, I look out on the marketplace and definitely want to apply that same level of domination. That was my goal on the wrestling mat to, building a successful company.
I only wrestled for 1 year, but I just want to add this real quick, is that I was in the greatest shape of my life. We ran 3 miles a day before we started to wrestle, which is just using your energy and essentially fighting somebody for a couple hours. And every time I'd wrestle somebody, I would be dead tired after like 30 seconds of the first round, even though I was in totally awesome shape. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it's full body in the way that it's hard to get a sense of in any other sport. It's literally another person trying to move you around. So you're using your legs, you're using your arms, they're pulling on your neck, your back gets tired. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, it really, kept me in shape in high school and in college. And, now that I'm no longer training, competing, I'm trying to find other ways to stay active. But there's nothing like a wrestling workout. And I'll go back to MIT and compete, and just wrestle with those guys for fun. And it's amazing how quickly you get winded.
How did you wind up choosing MIT as the school to go to?
Like I mentioned, through wrestling, kind of found myself academically and really discovered that I love to learn and love school, and had some really amazing teachers at my high school in the math and science and engineering department. And I think what was most powerful was this engineering class I took called Green Engineering. So Greenengineering. So green and engineering. And that class was all about, it was mission based. Our teacher was super enthusiastic. He said, we're going to save the world. We're going to use science and engineering and technology, and we're going to create clean, renewable fuels, and we're going to rate reusable bags from, garbage material. And what really caught my eye in that class was this idea that, what we learn in school applies elsewhere. Like I always thought, math is math class and chemistry is chemistry class. And when I go outside the school, I can forget about that. But he really showed, no. Like everything you use in every day was engineered by someone. And these people have an incredible power to impact many, many hundreds, thousands, millions, tens of millions of people with their work, and that was very exciting to me. And, I always viewed myself more as a math and science person. So I applied to mainly science and engineering schools and, was lucky enough to get into MIT, and then didn't really know what to expect. I kind of thought it's a bunch of nerds and, not really very social. And when I visited, I was really shocked to discover, oh my God, there's people like me here. There's people who like sports or who are into music or who have these extracurriculars. And just kind of, that first time I visited, I was like, wow, I can see myself here. And that was kind of what convinced me.
I noticed that 2 of your partners, it looks like there's 4 of you. 2 of them have PhDs. Do you anticipate getting your PhD once you've got this up and going?
Interesting question. My mom would maybe give you one answer. But so I actually deferred graduate school at MIT to start the business. I was thinking about doing a PhD in material science and deferred entry to come here. And, now that I've been involved in, I feel like doing a startup and being involved in trying to make something, I'm learning just as much, if not more, as I would in a PhD program, but it's less specialized. So I think on the one hand, I see my co-founders, Matt and David, and they both have PhDs, and, I see the level of depth that they're able to go into a problem, and certainly that's attractive. On the other hand, I think of the breadth of skills you can learn in the time you would have spent learning a PhD. And I feel like, I'm more attracted by the idea of connecting different fields together, which maybe is less typical of a kind of specialized PhD. So at this point in time, I would say more likely not than yes, but we'll see what happens with our company. I could certainly imagine doing it, and I think it'd be a very fulfilling experience, and I would learn a lot and grow a lot, but I could also imagine not doing it. So 50-50 at this point.
Sounds good. Okay, what is Ember Wave?
Yeah, so Ember Wave is basically a product for people who are too hot or cold in environments where everyone around them are comfortable. What it does is it helps you feel warmer or colder when you need it most. And it's basically, in the simplest put, it's a wristband that changes temperature to make you feel better. So with the push of a button, you can start warming up or cooling down. And the reason it works, or the real insight we had, is that warming and cooling one spot on your body can improve your overall comfort without changing your core temperature. And this is something we all kind of knew intuitively insofar as we've warmed our hands by a campfire, where you're warming your hands on a chilly fall night and you just really feel better overall. Or, you're dipping your toes in the ocean on a hot summer day. And we really took that experience of, the power of thermal sensation that we all know, and we're able to, thanks to some, science and engineering, transform it into a product that makes it more accessible and convenient for people who don't have control of temperature and suffer as a result.
Actually, I'd thought of something like this as a kid, because I was always wondering why you couldn't put something on and it could make your body the exact temperature you want. But then I thought that your body would adapt and then it would overcompensate in the wrong direction or something, thereby either messing you up or making you hotter or colder than you wanted to be. Was that something that you had to consider, or?
Yeah, that's definitely something we considered, and it speaks to the complexity of the way our body adapts to temperature. Even starting at the highest level, humans are warm-blooded mammals, so we have the ability to regulate our body temperature and generate heat and do things like sweating when we're too hot or shivering when we're too cold. And you can contrast that with cold-blooded animals like snakes that need to literally lie in the sun to warm up. So, then you can go one step further and you say, okay, our body's always working to regulate our core temperature. And again, what we're able to do is improve comfort without changing your core temperature, because one of the misconceptions people have is that when you're uncomfortable, it's your core temperature that changed. Like, I'm too hot, my core temperature is above 98.6. That's not the case. When your core temperature is above 98.6 is when you have a fever. But instead, what generally happens when you're too hot, if you start to pay close attention, what you notice is that different parts of your body are too warm. If my armpits are too warm or my face is flushed. Similarly, when you're too cold, it's, my ears are cold or my hands are cold. And, what your body's doing is it's adjusting to the thermal stimuli it's receiving and changing things like blood flow to help maintain that core temperature. So there's a lot that goes on, and we had to work very hard to make sure we're working with your natural response to temperature, with your thermoregulatory system, as opposed to trying to trick it or work against it in any way. We're just trying to be, something that can help you get a little extra boost when your systems run amok.
And now it's time for a commercial break. You're listening to the Invention Stories Podcast, Episode 15, Sand Shames and Amber Waves, Part 1. For more information, please visit their website at www.embrwave.com. At the end of each episode, I invite listeners to email us with questions or comments about the show. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about podcasting as well. You can email us at inventionstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Now, the question we've been asked most oftenly recently is, what kind of microphone should a beginning podcaster use? Now, the one that I've listened to, and it seems like most of the top podcasters use, is the Heil PR40. It's terrific. And if you're someone who wants to do something and do it right, the Heil PR40 is the microphone for you. If you would like to purchase the Heil PR40, we invite you to go to www.inventionstories.com/PR40. Now, we use the Audio-Technica ATR 2100 here at the Invention Stories Podcast, and it costs less than $80. To purchase the Audio-Technica ATR 2100, please visit www.inventionstories.com/ATR. How does the Ember Waves actually work?
Yeah, so the sensation is focused on the area of your wrist where you're wearing it. For example, I like to wear it on the inside of my wrist, close to my arteries. And the way you use it is there's basically two buttons, or really a single bar with buttons on each side that we call the light bar. And the light bar, one side is blue and one side is red. And that's really the way to control the sensation of temperature, where most people that think about temperature think about the thermostat, 72 degrees. But 72 sometimes feels hot and sometimes feels cold. So what we want to instead help people realize that the best way to think about temperature is just, what is the sensation that I'm experiencing? And what you can do is when you turn it on, if I turn it on now and I start cooling my wrist, I feel a cool sensation on my wrist, but because I feel a little warm right now, there's a really strong pleasure component associated with that sensation. So in other words, it's really pleasant. And again, you can go back to the idea of like when you dip your toes in the ocean on a hot day, your feet feel cold, but it also actually feels really good overall. And that helps give an overall sense of relief. And people say things like, after a few minutes, I feel my whole body cooling down, or I feel the waves of temperature kind of moving through me. It's certainly true that not everyone has that effect. Generally, let's say if you are perfectly comfortable and you use it, then you'll tend to just feel a sensation most strongly locally. But if you're uncomfortably warm or cold and you start to use it, then you'll tend to have a more overall effect. And, just maybe a visual way to think about it is, you can imagine on a horizontal or x-axis, you have sensation, where you have very cold, very hot. And then imagine on the y-axis, you have how pleasant or unpleasant it is. So very pleasant, very unpleasant. When you're too hot, you're saying, I feel too warm and I'm unpleasant. If you start to give someone cooling, you're going to move towards the colder side and up the y-axis towards a more pleasant space. And what we really try to help people do is say, at any given moment, there's a level of sensation that's going to feel most pleasant to you. We're going to give you the ability to tune in that sensation, and then that'll help you feel better. So it's less like I turn it on and I feel my toes get cold. It's more like my wrist is cooler, and that kind of helps provide some thermal relief overall.
How did this come to be? Were you all in the same class? Was this a class project or?
So I met my co-founders when I was an undergrad in the material science and engineering department. And as you mentioned, they were graduate students pursuing PhDs. And every year in the summer, our department sponsors a summer contest called MadMech. That's really a prototyping contest, a chance to get your hands dirty and actually make something out of the materials that we spend all day studying. And so I really thought that Matt and David were just really smart people and wanted to work with them. So I asked them to do this contest together. And we said, okay, great, that'd be fun. We'll form this team. We didn't really have an idea going in, but the theme of the contest was sustainability. And we decided that, right now, buildings use a lot of energy. How can we help buildings be more sustainable? And we realized, buildings use so much energy heating and cooling people, yet people are still uncomfortable. We're in this freezing lab having to wear a sweatshirt, and it's the middle of June. So we thought, let's heat and cool people directly. And then we were inspired by the old wives' tale of putting an ice cube on your wrist or running your wrist under cold water when you're too hot.
Oh, I used to do that. I thought it was supposed to cool your blood down, and so that was just a wives' tale, huh?
I mean, it definitely works. Whether or not it's cooling your blood or not, I think maybe some more rigorous scientific research is needed, but you feel more comfortable. And in many ways, that speaks to a key point, which is, comfort as it's defined is basically mainly a psychological state. It's impacted by physiological things like your core temperature, like blood flow. But comfort itself is like the psychological condition of saying, I'm not hot, I'm not cold, I feel neutral. And that's really a subjective experience, which is why the sensation of temperature, the subjective experience of temperature, is much more important than the objective, quantitative degrees of room is in.
Okay. I was looking at your timeline, and it looks like you've been a finalist at Intel and will make it wearable. You've been in a number of competitions. The U.S. National Science Foundation, you got a $225,000 grant from them. Is that how you've been able to finance and make this 4 years of research possible? Is it through grants?
So initially, it was competitions like Intel. We also had some competitions at MIT. We did also end up raising some money from some private investors, friends and family, as well as some angel investors. But that grant also helped as well. So we've been fortunate to get capital from a bunch of different sources. But grants and competitions and non-dilutive funding have been really valuable for us.
Okay, here's the question I got to ask you. How's been the prototype process? I mean, the whole thing must be either a prototype process or you've got to be testing things. So it must have been about the longest process ever, huh? I mean, it started off being big, right? And now it looks like almost a watch size.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the blog post where we changed the name, you can see an old proof of concept and you see, you're wearing something on the wrist and it's got wires coming out to a big messy thing of controls. And, that was what we won the competition with in 2013. And then we continued to make some developments part-time. We will start while we were students in the 2013-14 school year. And then basically the journey from the summer 2014 to summer 2015 was trying to make all the controls and put it in a single form factor. And we probably went through at least 4 different versions of messing with the design and how the different components were arranged. And, it took a while just to make something that didn't break, and then to make something that didn't break and was attractive enough that we could start testing it. And then, like you said, we spent a lot of time testing. So around the second half of 2015, we focused on doing about 200 or 250 field trials with a bunch of different customer segments and people who had met online and people who reached out to us to really find out, like, what's the value proposition and what features do we need or not need. And from that feedback at the end of 2015, we said, okay, now let's go design the commercial product. And, we worked with some really talented industrial designers and came up with the concept. And, even then we had the concept, but then we had to go through a bunch more iterations to make it manufacturable. And it really takes an army, because it takes customers to give us feedback on what the design needs, designers to figure out how it should all work together. We had to bring our suppliers in because they're the ones actually making the components. We had to bring our manufacturer because they're putting it all together. And it was just a bunch of iterations and loops, getting everyone's feedback, making changes. And as a result of many cycles of that, we've ended up with something that we're really proud of.
You've been listening to episode 15 of the Invention Stories podcast, Sam Shames and Ember Wave. I want to thank Sam for being our guest today, and we invite you to check out their Kickstarter campaign page. A link will be provided on the InventionStories.com website. For more information, please visit www.embrwave.com. If you're an inventor who would like to be featured on the Invention Stories podcast, have a suggestion on how we can make this podcast better, or would like to become a sponsor, please contact us at inventionstoriespodcast@gmail.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we invite you to give us a positive review at iTunes. An easy way to get there is www.inventionstories.com/review. More information and show notes can be found at our website, www.inventionstories.com. If you would like to purchase the Heil PR40, we invite you to go to www.inventionstories.com/PR40. To purchase the Audio-Technica ATR 2100, please visit www.inventionstories.com/ATR. Thank you very much for listening today, and please tell a friend.